So tonight we're going to be tackling projects. We're going to put into perspective, excuse me, those topics we have covered and how we can tie them into questions when it comes to project related, because during interviews, you're going to be asked questions like, for example, can you tell us a project you are currently working on? Or they may also ask you, can you tell us a project you are proud of? Any successful project. They may also ask you, can you tell us a difficulty you have encountered in a project? So these are project-related questions. So you must be able to take the topics which we have created and format them such a way that it appears to be a project. For example, if we are talking about all the assignments you guys have been doing, those are projects related. So if you did installation and configuration, we also did assignments on permissions, cron jobs, network, and installing Nagios. So you should be able to picture those projects and then run a narration such that it sounds very conducive or convincing. Does that make sense? So let me share my screen and we work on some of the projects. I'm naming some of the topics and then see how we put that into perspective with regards to what we are saying. Do not hesitate to ask a question, interrupt me and ask a question in case you need any clarification. Hold on, let me drop down this volume. Okay. So let's discuss on some of the topics. Which let me see. I need a black color here. I need to give me gray. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So what are the topics we have covered?
NFS.
Okay. NFS. VM. Patching.
Repositories.
Reports. So I need everybody to, say something. Nagios.
Disaster recovery.
Password hardening.
What do we use Nagios for?
Monitoring.
Good. Passwordless authentication.
Automation.
VMware. So these are priority topics, which means when you're going for an interview, you have to have at the back of your mind that it is competitive, which means there are long lists of other candidates who are interviewing for that same position. So you must be able to get your priority topics that are like a joker that you want to showcase in that interview. Those are the topics you'll be using, If they are asked, what project are you currently working on? And that question can come in different forms. But the formula we're going to be using is that you have to, first of all, create a problem. So in responding on any project-related question, the first thing you do is, so let's say steps, create a problem. Let me move this a little bit to the right.
What time are you working tomorrow?
Monday.
One.
Kevin is off Monday.
Okay, 2, we said suggested solution. And then the third one is steps. Steps to implement the solution. So what do I mean by this? So if you're asked this question, can you please tell us a project you are currently working on? We are saying don't just jump into responding. You have to first of all create a scenario of a problem that was in existence, and then the solution you suggested to solve that problem. And these are the steps that are needed to implement that solution. Are we clear up to this point?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. So if I may ask, which topic do you look over here and you think, oh, this is my good topic. This is something I really like to use in an interview if I'm asked about a project that we can use as an example. We want to choose anything here which you think you love it and you like to use as an example from everything we have written on the board.
Patching.
Okay, patching. So let's kick off with patching. So let's take, for example, we'll say we're doing with patching. Okay. All right. So you have posed the question, Ms. Eunice, can you please? Thank you for taking out time to take this interview with us. We really appreciate your time. Let's begin by asking you, can you tell us the project you are currently working on? Now, with that question, you have to follow the formula we created. We said, first of all, create a problem. So you have to narrate what problem was in existence during your patching or in regards to the topic patching you want to use. So your response is simple. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. In my current project that we are working, we had a situation with patching our servers. One of the difficulties we're facing was that the servers were poorly configured, which means they were not partitioned such that every mount point is independent. For example, you have /temp/var. Everything was built in old-fashioned way by such that everything is depending on /root. So that was giving us the hell of issues whenever we bring in patches to patch the systems. Either we always have disks fill up and systems could not be patched. And so that was a whole issue in this current project, which I'm working on. So as a solution, I suggested to the management or to, that we should be able to repartition these servers by adding extra disks to the system to increase the disk space, and then partition them such that we can have independent mount points like /temp/var, /var/temp, and so var/temp, yes, such that we can successfully patch these servers. Are we clear up to this point?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the problem I presented? Who can recall?
Yes, so the problem was you couldn't have a successful patching because you didn't have enough mount points. So, and you always get in
You didn't have enough disk space.
this space, yes.
Okay, good. What was the suggested solution?
To create, to repartition the server to have multiple mount points so we can have enough disk space.
All right, good, correct. Who else have another suggestion or had something else? That's good, Eunice.
Thank you.
The precision of the mount points like per term and I noticed you did not just create the problem, you created a problem, but you were specific in giving the names of the different mount points like var,
Correct.
and so on.
Correct. That was because I'm trying to sell myself more, let them know that I know what I'm saying. So yes, I was specific in creating the problem, and the solution was who can give us the solution, just like what Eunice said.
So you added a disk?
Good. The solution was to add an external disk and partition that disk so that we can create those mount points which are listed as a problem. Does that make sense? Are we together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so following our 3 steps approach, we have created a problem and we have a solution. Now, simply put, steps to implementing this solution. So now, the third point is for you to say, in order to add an external hard drive or a new hard drive to a server, these are the steps that are involved. Then you start by discussing initialization using the fdix utility. Run the fdix command against the device name. For example, let's say we are doing /dev/sdb. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now choose P for primary. You explain that the first 3 partitions going to be primary, and the next step food one is going to be an extended. You don't need to give all those details. However, let it be, make sure that your presentation should be convincing that they know that even if you don't give those details, there are some things if you mention or not that you know what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
With that now in mind, you complete your partitions. You can say P to print so as to see the partitions specifications that you have made, and W to write changes permanently. That's W to save. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You can go further
Yes.
because we all understand that disk partitioning is in 2-fold. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which 2 kinds can we do when we are doing disk partitioning?
You can do LVM or standard partitioning.
Perfect. So in this narration, you can tell that, hey, I can decide to do standard or I can decide to do logical volume. So for standard, this is what I'll do. For logical volumes, I'll need to create physical volumes, create a volume group, and then do logical volume. You see, you're just giving a big picture. Then you are selling yourself so that you let them know, you know what is standard partitioning and you know what is logical, because you don't know if there's going to be a logical volume question coming up. Does that make sense? And you must be able to sell yourself using that. That's another way of calling attention. There's no way you mention logical volume that somebody in that panel will not come up now, say, hey, let me check this candidate's knowledge on logical volumes. And highest they will ask you is, what are the commands to extend a volume? Or what will you do in this scenario? Set up a scenario-based question. So no matter which of the projects, you must follow this formula. And the first one is create a problem, suggested solution, excuse me, and then steps to implement that suggested solution. Are we are we clear with patching?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interviewer is not going to tell you that we're going to ask you a project-based question. They may just keep up and say, tell us about, you know, something which you are proud of. Tell us about an achievement that you think in this your 8 years of career as a Linux engineer, which you are proud of. Now, it's the same scenario you're going to build. Any of these topics you're going to use, we still stay on patching. You're still going to create a problem. You're still going to bring out a suggested solution and steps. So, for example, with that question, you can begin by saying, thank you for this opportunity. There are several projects which I'm very proud of. However, this particular one really stands out. This one on patching. We had this scenario whereby systems were poorly built, and whenever we want to patch them, we are never successful because we are always run into not enough disk space. This was because this server was not partitioned correctly with separate mount points. Everything was depending on boot. So as a suggestion, I propose that we should rebuild this server by adding external hard drive and repartition them such that it can reflect or provide enough disk space. This was approved and I was actually responsible to carry out this project. These are the steps I use in implementing this. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you lay out your steps. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it is, if you look keenly, that's patching is one of our priorities. In fact, it's a star project. So that's something everyone should not go to an interview and don't have patching as one of your projects or related topics to discuss with. Also, you should now know that if you're introducing yourself, all of these should feature in at least a sentence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. So which other topic?
It's Oben.
Yes, go ahead.
It's Oben. In response to the question of patching, is it very important to talk about documenting the different processes while carrying on the patching?
Yes, anything you are doing or discussing in an interview, documentation is a very important skill. So even if you do not mention it in this, it is important to mention it. What I'm saying is mention it in any conversation you're having, even when you're introducing yourself, rounding up by saying that documentation is one of my passion, which means I always make sure that I document every step in what I do. We're going to bring it this one when we discuss troubleshooting next week, because every job wants to hire someone who, want to leave a trace behind in all what they do. In your absence, somebody should be able to look through your documentation and implement the things you have been doing. In your absence, so let me say you're sick or you can't make it to work, the job cannot stand still because you are ill. So documentation, you're correct. Manual is very good. It's fine for you to mention that you always do document or write down these steps. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes.
And documentation itself is a whole project, because these are some of the things they usually give newbies, new system admin. Inside your first 1 month, they'll tell you to, please, can you write us a documentation on any of these things. They can say on NFS, you can say on installation, you can say on logical or patching. Just write down steps. We don't have any documentation on how we build servers. Can you jot down something? Now, most documentations are written on what we call a wiki. Wiki or a SharePoint. SharePoint is an online web application that you can use like a web document, which every team member do have access. So very important to mention writing down. We're going to see it in some job descriptions. They're saying we are looking for someone who is good with communications, both verbal and written. Does that make sense? So yes, that's very important when it comes to talk about writing. That's fine. So let's take another topic. Can somebody choose something else? So let's discuss another project. So looking at this board which we are sharing, what do you think? Have we done disaster recovery, Eunice and Christelle?
No problem.
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll bring that in during AWS review. So priority topics, we're gonna do NFS. Since nobody wanna choose, I'll choose for you guys. Let's do NFS, correct?
What I told you.
So what we are doing here, you all must also
Yeah,
have,
my bed buy me cocoa like.
Crystal, can you mute? So what we are doing here is these topics, everybody, I prefer you spend more time. If you have not mastered them, master these ones that we are putting on the start. These are your joke cards that you want to use to sell yourself with in any scenario. So with regards to your project, as we are speaking, how will you bring in NFS? First of all, what does NFS stands for? Can you remember?
Network file sharing.
Good. Network file sharing, which means we are sharing files and directives through the network, over the network. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It is usually used to share files between operating systems. For example, Unix and Linux. While Samba is used for what scenario?
Windows, Linux, and
Windows.
Windows.
Perfect. So mention it in your conversation. Let them know that you know about Samba. You know, and so since we're discussing this, so how about if they ask you what are the steps for implementing Samba? It's something you have not done. So everybody should write this down. For any interview question that you have no idea about, you have no knowledge, let them know that we do have a team at Dynamic Tech that handles every related issues pertaining to that topic. So let's say we are talking about Samba. And I say, oh, okay, Ms. Eunice, I heard you mentioning Samba when we were discussing about NFS. Can you tell us about the steps, how do you implement Samba? Your response should be simple. Thank you very much for this question. When it comes to Windows applications, setting up Samba, we do have a dedicated Windows team that handles everything Windows related. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now that is for Samba. As I said, the formula is for every topic. How about if they say disaster recovery and you have no idea? Simple. We do have a team that is dedicated for disaster recovery scenarios. So they take care of everything disaster recovery related. How about networking? And you have no idea. The same thing. We do have a dedicated team. So that is to avoid you saying, I do not know. Does
Mr.
that make
Alben,
sense?
Mr. Alben,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
in the case of Samba, and if you don't know about Samba, but you know how to do for Linux, is it not important that after you say that there's a team dedicated to do Samba, but I'm familiar with the Linux version, and you talk about it, or you just leave it at that point and close it?
No, very, very important for you to, because we're going to discuss that how to derail your interviewers into your comfort zone. So, for example, with regards to what Emmanuel just narrated, you ask a question on Samba. However, carry them into NFS because that's where you're comfortable. So we were treating from NFS to Samba. So that's why I use, so, but you're correct. So in any scenario, as we said, you mentioned there's a dedicated team. However, I'm very good with NFS, which is the Linux version of Samba. And with NFS, these are the steps that are involved. You now narrate NFS. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's a small derail, but we are trying to target NFS regards to a project. So let's get back to point. Okay. So you want to use NFS as one of the projects which you're proud of, which you're successful, or which you are currently working on, because that question can come in any of these three domains. So the first thing is to let them know that there was a problem. What was that problem? And then this is the solution. And then these are the steps. So to begin with, we had this scenario whereby we had users that were in a Linux environment, and we also have some Solaris boxes. Solaris is Unix. Is that correct?
Yes.
And most of them had files in common, which they need to be able to move from one server to another. And so it was becoming difficult because sometimes some users do not have access to these Solaris boxes, while Linux users don't have access to, while Solaris users don't have access to the boxes. So there was this constraint to moving files over back and forth. So I suggested that to solve this issue, we can set up an NFS shared directory whereby both users in the Linux environment can share files with users in the Solaris environment and vice versa. We agree that when we set up NFS, we can see files on both track directions. Is that true? You remember
Yes,
when you
sir.
Yes.
when you create a file in the client, you
Mhm.
move to the master, you see the file. You create a file in the master, you move to the client, you see the file, correct?
Yes.
So the problem here is the difficulty of users in Unix environment sharing files with users in the Linux environment. You have created that problem. Now, what was the solution? The solution you suggested was the fact that we should be able to create an NFS shared directory, which gives that capability of both Unix and Linux users to share common files. Does that make sense? Now, after presenting that solution, these are the steps for creating an NFS shared directory. And you start by stating them, creating your export file, getting into export, entering all those details, by using formulative and running all those commands. And that's the approach we use when it comes to project. Does that make sense with NFS?
Yes.
So as we are saying, hot topics that everyone should be able to discuss when it comes to projects are what we have here in green, and they are all start. So let's move to passwordless authentication is also very important. I like we're gonna do this one also. Nagios too is very important. Nagios is simple, in one of your clients at Dynamic Tech, they had no monitoring tool. What is who can figure out the advantage of a monitoring tool? What do you think a monitoring tool will help in an environment that one was not in existence? One sentence. Yes, go ahead.
Monetary tools give us ability to check all the resources and all of the servers that we have.
Yes.
And those resources are checking for disk space, the CPUs, as well as checking to see if the network are connected.
Perfect. On a single dashboard.
On a single dashboard.
That with that, that's the addition. That is a perfect, clean definition. And that's the kind of thing you want to present as a solution. Because with that in mind, now you know how to formulate that problem. Is that correct? What was the problem before Nagios? The problem was that there was no monitoring tool. And we were checking the servers manually, which means you have to log in, do df-h, and then you see disk space. You open server 2, you log in again, you have df-dash, then you see disk space. You open server 3, and that environment have 250 servers. So how many servers are you going to log into? You're going to log into 250, correct?
Yes, which is time consuming.
And very, what's the best word to use? I don't want to
Inefficient. Inefficient way of working.
Perfect. Time consuming. It means you're not, you don't have time to do any other thing. You're just from when you came in the morning till 12, you have been logging into servers and checking disk space. So that was an issue right there. And Nagios came in to, create a single dashboard, which just with a single glance, you can see 250 servers and see all of them green. And that tells you that everything is fine. Does that make sense? So looking at our examples that we have stated this evening, who can give us an example, create a problem with Nagios monitoring tool, and then propose solution? Just those 2 steps, because the steps to implement is just a single script run. Who wants to try? we just mentioned everything this event. We spoke about, you know, in the absence of Nagios, it was tedious. You have to log into every server. So that was very inefficient way of working. So you propose, you know, building of monitoring tool, and you're an expert in Nagios. Each and any one of you who have set up Nagios, you are very comfortable, and I authorize you to call yourself an expert. So you don't just go down and tell them, I can say, call yourself, I'm an expert when it comes. You need to know what it means to set up a monitoring tool. What some of you did, that's a skill that you need. We have a student who is currently working with Nagios company just for doing this Nagios project. Cedric, he's not in class here. He was in class the first day we did interview preps. So that's a huge skill. So don't go low on it. Make sure you use it to sell yourself appropriately. So does that make sense? Are we clear with Nagios, or I should discuss about Nagios more in detail?
Clear.
So we have, as we said, forget about installation. Very few questions. If you say you're a system admin with 8 years of experience, they know that installation is your bread and butter. So nobody will worry you much about that. But you need to be able to use these other topics as ready projects to go with in case of any scenario. So passwordless authentication, very important. And especially when you have to deal with banks and commercial agencies and some hospitals also, in case you're supporting the health sector, they do passwordless authentication a lot. And so if you want to use this, your opening statement should be that, well, let's follow our formula. Let's create a problem. So what was the issue here? In one of our current clients at Dynamic Tech, which I'm supporting, we had scenarios whereby they were moving files, which another way to say that is deployment. They were deploying files using cron jobs. Are we familiar with deploying files using cron jobs? Hello? Are we familiar with moving files from one server to another using cron jobs?
Yes.
All right, good. So which command do we use to move files from one server to another?
SCPCQ.
Yes, SCP.
Yeah.
So good. So you want to use passwordless authentication. However, you want to create a problem first. So in this current client, they were using cron jobs to do deployments, and you know, it was giving a hell of issues because some days the cron job would deploy, some days the cron job will fail. We agree that for a cron job to run successfully, there must be something that should be running at the back end. What's the name of that process that runs at the back end for any service to run successfully? Good. What's the daemon for cron jobs?
Chrome D.
Perfect. Perfect. So you see, you're not just answering the questions, but you are selling some details about cron jobs which you know to the interviewers. Does that make sense? You're mentioning cron D. You're telling them things that they're shaking, they're nodding their head and say, yes, this candidate knows what he or she is talking about. And so cron D is a daemon that is responsible to make sure that I'm narrating. I'll come back and then give a one conclusion on this. Cron D is a daemon that makes sure that cron jobs are successfully run. So there are situations whereby these cron jobs fail. Somebody is not muted. Emmanuel.
Oh, sorry.
There are situations whereby this cron job failed, and so it was a back and forth. You know, it will be successful some days. So I suggested that we can create a seamless process whereby these jobs will move and it will not require any human intervention. For example, entering password. You know, so I propose that we should create a passwordless authentication. Now, it is important to state here that you should never create passwordless authentication is always created for regular users and not for the root users. Write down this statement. It's very important. You must make this statement that you should never create passwordless authentication for a root user. It is usually done only for regular users. Is that clear? So, with that in mind, I've been to an interview and I was asked this question about 2 years ago. And the moment I make mention of the fact that, this should never be done using a root account, you can only use regular users to create it. The interviewer stopped me and said, I know, you must know what to do. And they move to the next question. So these are some of the techniques that when you present them, these are some of the terminologies when you use or details when you give them, they know that you know what you're talking about. So you must mention some things, as we said. For example, in Punjab, mention Kanji as a daemon that is responsible. And if this daemon is not running, cron jobs will always fail. So now we are presented a problem. We now giving a suggestion for passwordless authentication, whereby we'll now create a user that does not require password to log in. And so that user should be able to move files from one server to another. Now, very importantly, is for you to state that these are usually users that does not require logging in onto the server. The reason I'm saying so is because an interviewer may ask you, do you usually create these for other regular users? No, we create it only for users that are being used by the systems. For example, this user we are creating will be used by the cron jobs, correct? Because it will not warrant a password. And also we can create it for other users like Nagios or other applications. So we can have something like Apache running, and there's an Apache user that is used to move services within that server. So what I'm saying is users that are related to application, those are the only kind of users we can create them to go through passwordless authentication. No regular user should change their authentication to be passwordless. So user Johnny should never be passed. User Mary, Edward, any user that is being used by a human should always have a password. Does that make sense? Are we communicating?
No. Can you say that again? The part where I know when we create the passwordless authentication, we never do that for roots. We do that for
Correct.
regular users. But
Correct.
can you explain to me the part where you said the only users that's already on the system should have it?
So what we are saying here is when you get to work, you're correct. In school, what we did it for user maybe Peter. So let's say we create it for Peter. But that's because we're in a study environment. So when you get to work, every user that on that system should have a password. If a scenario whereby we want to create a passwordless user to use for cron jobs, it's not gonna, nobody is gonna have that username. So we're gonna call it, maybe we can call it cron job user.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or we can call it Nagios user.
Yes.
But we should never come and maybe user Johnny. And these are some of the temptations. And this is why some people don't like system admin at work, because some people will come, oh, this thing that we have to change password every 60 days is boring. Can you just make my password passwordless? Now, especially somebody, your friend, you guys go for lunch all the time. You guys have become buddies, right? During communication, just say, can you just make my, this is really boring, making sure that every 30 days I'll change my password. No, you have to refrain from doing that because it's bad practice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The only users that we can make the password are users that we created within the system and it's being used by the system. Like as we said, Nagios or being used by cron jobs. So that's what I was explaining. So yes, that's the only scenario whereby you can say, yes, we can set up. So now regards to passwordless authentication, we have these jobs that were running and they were failing. And I propose that we set a passwordless user to be able to run these jobs and not be able to need for someone to enter a password. And these are the steps for creating a passwordless user. What was the first key to set up a passwordless user? What's the first step? So let's say we want to create passwordless for user 01. What will you do first thing?
You have to make sure both users exist in both of the servers.
Perfect. Step number 1. Step number 2.
Need the IP address.
The IP address is for you to log in. So you're already logging. And you have made those users.
Then RSA command to get the public and key.
Now there's something you do before you run the key. Remember, you're running the key as which user. So you have to switch to that user that you want to set up.
Yes.
Because if you run that key as root, you'll be creating the authentication for root. So step number 1, make sure that user is in both servers. So if you have to do that for 100 servers, then that user has to be created for all those servers. And then switch to that user and then run your SSH key gen key. And that key that will be created will now be moved into all those servers. And that user will be able to log into those servers without any need for a password. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So good. So these 3 projects, I need 4 projects. I need everyone to go back, do a write-up, create a problem, write the problem, write the solution, and jot down the steps as your own summary notes. Because if you are going for an interview tomorrow, you're not going to be listening to class recordings that we have done. No, that'll be too much waste of time. You'll be looking back through your summary notes, notes that you made during interview preps, notes that you made while you were studying. Those are the summary notes that you can take 2 hours and go through the whole course. Very important. So make sure you write that down and be able to have it handy such that you can use it during reviews before any your scheduled interview. Any questions?
No, Prof, can you send us a recording, please?
Sure, as always. Always send the well, were you able to access the YouTube?
Yes.
Yes, I'm trying to upload it to YouTube.
The problem was when you watch it on TV, it's blinking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's why I had to go to my laptop to see the same thing, then it was different, and that's why I didn't call again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll send you guys the
Mr. Owen, also don't forget
link.
the previous one you promised sending to me, you did not.
I send the YouTube. You could not access it?
No, I did not. You did not send.
I put it on the global chat.
Okay, because you asked me to send my email, so I was looking forward to seeing it on my email.
Oh, okay. I'll send it to you then. Just shoot me a text
I
tonight.
sent my last message to you was that.
Okay. Yes, someone was saying something?
I was just
Yes,
saying
so,
me too. That's Hannah.
oh, okay, Hannah. Sure. I'll send that out. So when it comes to project, this is our approach. Next week, we're gonna discuss troubleshooting. There's a document I'm gonna send out. Well, I'm gonna share that after the troubleshooting conversation. You don't want to miss next week because troubleshooting is covers about 60% of interviews. You want to know troubleshooting in different scenarios. Troubleshooting for network, troubleshooting for disk space, troubleshooting as a user can log in. Everything is around different steps you take and how do you approach that? So we may use 2 weeks for troubleshooting so as to make sure that we cover everything in detail. And those of you interviewing already, please bring up questions in any of these topics that we are covering, or even if it's not a topic, if I need to respond to it, I'll do. If not, I'll say write it down so we treat it when we are discussing that topic so that we don't derail that much. But this is how I want to make the interview prep short, just an hour, so that we can go through the recordings and digest it. We need you guys to be out there, taking these interviews. We are in the month of September, October. By November, they start, dropping down. The numbers start dropping down, and December nobody's hiring. Everybody's is getting ready for holidays. So let's take advantage of this market at the moment and make sure you upload your resumes. Apply directly. Make sure you have your profiles on LinkedIn, Indeed, Career Builder, Monster, Dice, all those platforms. Saturate them and respond to emails and calls, and I believe you'll have something. Any questions as we run off for the night? All right, no questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making it here tonight. Let's meet up again next week, and see you, for those of you in class, see you on Wednesday. God bless you all. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good night.